waiting on Palmacino and Kale.
Yeah, I think my still covered it, like I said, a little more up. But I think it's third. As long as we make sure the other word. Yep. I think we can go.
Good afternoon, everyone. We'll call to order the Grand Forks Local Government Advisory Committee for Thursday, December 10th, 2020. Do a roll call. City of Grand Forks, Sandy's here. Mock. Here. County of Grand Forks is Tom Falk online.
I believe he is.
Right. And Mr. Engen, I see Mr. Engen's in here. Grand Forks School Board, Mikula. Here. Senator Carpenter. Here. Park District, Palmacino should be online, and the mayor's here. So under item 1, introductions and roll call, we've got a draft timeline, downtown action plan, and final financial incentives executive summary. Mr. Phelan.
Yes, thank you, Council President Sandy and members of the Local Government Advisory Committee. Just as an overview, what we're planning on doing today, I'm going to give you a quick overview. Michaela Hewitt, who works for Baker Tilly, she's a director there. She's also our financial advisor. She's going to give a broad overview. And so once we get through the broad overviews, what our intent is then to go specifically into the projects. So I'll provide a brief introduction of each project. All the developers will make a presentation, and then finally after each project, Michaela will come back and really get to the point of what the summarized recommendation on the incentive is moving forward. So Council President Sandy, it's quite humbling that we're here and we're talking about $110 million of private investment in our community. If you were here in March when this pandemic was going to start and you would have predicted we'd be here in December to do this, I don't think anyone would have predicted that we'd be here today. So I think it shows the strength of Grand Forks and how we've performed through this pandemic, so it's quite humbling. The Local Government Advisory Committee was really intended because any incentive beyond 5 years needs both the city, county, and school district to be aligned on these. So what we decided in 2018 that we would bring all the groups together up front so that everybody's hearing the information up front as we move through the process. Council President Sandy, we are intending to bring recommendations to the Committee of the Whole meeting on next week, Monday, and then the succeeding City Council meeting on the 21st. Those will be recommendations on these projects. They will also set the public hearing date because the City Council needs to make the final determination. That will be on February 1st. As we move forward, but throughout January, we intend to be at both the County Commission and the School Board meeting for their resolution too on this. So over the next month and a half or so, there'll be lots of activity regarding these projects. And the intent is really to give an opportunity up front to get some of the questions, some of the concerns, so not only the city of Grand Forks, but also the developers can work on some solutions that may come up today, okay? I think the important part is these are centered, one project's on the UND campus, 3 are in downtown. But just from what I've been working on, there's other projects that are going to be moving forward that are citywide, that are going to need similar incentives, just so everyone knows this. So I think encouraging other development moving forward, I think in the future you'll see other developments that will move forward that won't be just centered on campus or in the downtown area, that will require incentives. What we've done, City Council President Sandy and Mayor, under Mayor Buczynski, is, you know, our mill levy has not, value of a mill has not grown very much over the last few years. If you look at it, it's probably 1 to 2.5%. And so what we're really trying to be is more bold, more aggressive, and we can't do anything about the past. It's hard to do something about the present, but in the future, trying to be more aggressive so that whomever is sitting here 10, 15, 20 years from now, we're going to see some of these large investments come back all on the tax roll. So that's really our intent now, is to become more aggressive with the development community. With that, I've asked, I think Michaela is going to be online. She's going to give you a broad stroke of what incentives are about, what are some of the principles. And so as we go through every project, we don't have to keep reiterating those, but she's going to give us a broad overview of kind of why we're here today. So with that, I'd hand it over to Michaela.
Thank you.
Thank
Todd.
you. Good
Michaela?
afternoon.
Good morning, good afternoon.
Can I share my screen?
Yes, certainly, of course.
Okay.
I thought that was a rhetorical question.
Sorry. So, as Todd said, I put together a presentation to kind of talk through a couple items this morning. One, just to provide a quick overview and reminder on tax increment financing, how it works, since with the tax incentives, that's one of the tools that we're looking at using. Looking at provide an overview of our general financial review process. As we looked at each of these projects, our process for reviewing them is the same, even if there's different outcomes for those projects. So I wanted to walk through that. Talk a little bit about, in the city's application included with the public policy benefits, and really why the city is choosing to participate in these projects. And then following each of the individual projects, will provide a summary of our analysis and related to each of those.
And Michaela, we don't see your screen yet, so I don't think you've shared it yet.
Oh,
There you go.
we see it now? Okay,
Yeah,
sorry about
we can.
that. So again, the introduction for why we're here today. So tax increment financing, it's a financing tool that communities use to capture the tax-based growth that's resulting from a new development or redevelopment project. There's generally a fixed term for the capture or redirection of that incremental tax revenue, and then at which point that incremental taxes is adding to the existing tax base for each of the taxing entities. The increment that is generated by that increased value, it's created when the property is developed, and again, the incremental taxes are redirected for specific development purposes. Here's an illustration for how the increment is calculated. The existing value, so the base value prior to any vertical construction, the taxes from that piece of the property, those taxes continue to flow to the other taxing entities, and it's the building or the new development that is generating the incremental taxes that are captured and used to finance a portion of the public improvements. Here's just another model to illustrate that the green shaded area is really the base taxes, and again, those continue to flow to the other taxing jurisdictions. The incremental taxes that are generated from the development or redevelopment project are used to finance the eligible expenditures, and then at the point when the district is terminated, that chartreuse color is the increased tax base that all of the taxing jurisdictions will be able to benefit from. So it's, again, capturing for that period of time, and at which point the expected benefits of the tax increment are that all of the entities will have a higher tax base. So when we were asked to review the need for financial assistance for each of these projects, there is a process that we follow in which to do that review. And what we're trying to understand is really the financial feasibility of the project, which is in part driving the need for assistance. In doing that, we look at a couple of different factors related to the operating performance of the project, and that includes the debt coverage ratio, which is the ability and availability of revenues from the project to support the debt service repayments for which is financing the project. So to the extent that the net operating income is is able to cover that debt service, that will dictate the coverage. And there's general minimum coverage requirements that lenders want to see. And typical coverage requirements are 1.1 times or greater. The other factor that we look at on the other side of the sources of funds is the return on equity. So understanding, again, the cash flow performance of the project post-construction, understanding what the availability of cash flow is to repay the upfront equity into the project. We also take a look at what the extraordinary costs are for the project. So to the extent that there's additional costs for a particular site, that may include demolition, acquisition of existing buildings, additional public improvements or site improvements, any of those costs that are extra to the project and can't be absorbed by the financial performance of it. Also consider any of the public purpose benefits for which the project is meeting. And related to that is understanding which of the costs of the project are public as opposed to private. And the reason for looking at that is to the extent the performance of the project and the revenues available from it, the ability of those to support the private expenditures and which of those are financing the public expenditures. We also look at the type of assistance. Two common methods, and I'll get into it in a minute, is upfront, and that's providing assistance upfront for which there is a gap in the sources of funds for a particular project. As well as exemption, which assists with annual cash flow. So there are some due diligence steps that are taken when reviewing projects, and listed here are the steps that are taken to understand the participation in the projects. So going through, we want to understand the statutory authority for which we're using the different financial tools and what options are available. Understanding ultimately from the developer what the market demand is for the project being proposed. Understanding that the developer has site control and that they're able to do the project as proposed. And also want to understand the cost benefit of it, and the benefits for participating in the project are greater than those costs related to it. And lastly, when possible, looking at if a project that is being proposed and public participation, the likelihood of that project resulting in additional private investment in the area or in the city that does not require assistance. So in performing the needs assessment related to public financing, the steps, again, that we take, first we have to determine that there is a need for assistance. So it's kind of a two-part test. One, we understand if there's a need for assistance, and the second part of that is understanding what amount or type of public assistance is warranted. And ways that we look at that are, can financing of the public improvements be supported by the development alone without assistance? And similarly, are the private improvements able to be supported by the performance of the project? In looking at the needs assessment, we also understand and verify the developer assumptions, understanding that there's implications to the overall performance based on what is included in the projections. And also, to the best that we can, it's matching the available funding sources with those costs that are being financed. And lastly, really understanding if the development as proposed would occur, but for the use of public assistance. When looking at the financing requests, diving in a little bit more, we look at reviewing the sources and uses of funds. And typical sources that we'll see include the private debt and equity, and the level of debt and equity that's available for a project is based on the ultimate the value of the project post-completion, the ability of the revenues to support debt service, and attract equity investors. We also, TIF bonds for an upfront request could also be a source of funds. A general listing of uses that we see in most of the projects being reviewed today would include acquisition, construction costs, demolition, site work, any public improvements and amenities, and all the soft costs related to that. And in looking at the uses, again, within some of these itemized costs, which of those would be extraordinary for the project that can't be supported by the overall performance. With the sources and uses, there is a cash flow that's prepared, which is the operating pro forma. And this is looking at, again, the from the cash flow performance of the project to understand what is driving the gap, reviewing the expenses and understanding all the project cost estimates, what might be extraordinary, as well as the operating expenditures, which includes the property taxes for the project post-completion. Likewise, on the revenues, understanding what the lease rates might be. Most of these projects are mixed use, so it's understanding what the rental rates that are driving the revenues based on both the residential and commercial, in addition to any public assistance that would be included. We perform a feasibility analysis based on the cash flow, and as I mentioned, we look at all the assumptions related to the developer financials and understand if those are reasonable within current market conditions. And we also perform sensitivity analysis on some of the variables, including if there's absorption rate assumptions, lease rates, as I mentioned, for the different project components, vacancy rates, and occupancy, to really understand, again, what is driving the gap and to what ability we have to adjust some of the assumptions that may reduce the gap and limit the need for assistance. So from the city's tax incentive application, some of the public purpose benefits that are listed in there and were considered when reviewing these projects are listed here, and for which could drive the need for public assistance. And what listed here are achieving a high quality redevelopment in private investment that would otherwise not occur, removing slum or blight or rehabilitation of certain buildings, offsetting increased costs or the extraordinary costs compared to what you might see in a greenfield development, continuing to enhance and diversify your economic base, as well as contribute to the existing tax base. And lastly, to the extent the projects are also able to retain or increase the number or diversity of jobs that offer long-term stable employment. So listed here are additional policy objectives for why cities choose to use incentives. Again, you're trying to stimulate development that otherwise would not occur in meeting the but-for test, retaining and enhancing your tax base, encouraging development that otherwise would not occur, financing infrastructure improvements, or coordinating developments within existing plans related to the downtown or master planning. So in looking at financing costs through tax increment, the two major ones, and there's subsets of them, and upfront would be financed either through a bond issue or other upfront funding source in which the city would collect the revenue to pay the debt service, as opposed to an exemption, which can be flexible in the level of exemption that's being provided, and essentially reduces the operating expenses for the developer and it's based on the values and the taxes of the project post-completion. So with that, I think I will turn it back. Well, I can either address any questions or turn it back to Todd to continue.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions before? Hearing none. Todd?
Okay, now we'll go through the projects and get to the point. The first group up is the development called Beacon Development. Mr. Todd Burning is going to be the lead presenter on this. This is a project that did get changed. We first worked with the two of the owners, Mr. Ritterman and Mr. Tweeten. It was first set up to be more of a mixed use, more apartment driven kind of development. Along the way, Epic Development became a partner in the project, and hence that public space that you see as part of this development. That's a pretty exciting development. It really aligns well with the downtown action plan when we were looking at renewing the existing town square. But this event space, what we're, as part of a proponent, it's the way to help finance that space, and it's a way to have a more bold public space mixed in with as part of a mixed-use development. Finally, it really helps with the gateway down into Demers Avenue. So it's changed along the way, and to be frank, as part of the plan, it became a more bold and big project as we move forward. So with that, I'd ask Mr. Burning and his team to kick off the presentation.
Good afternoon, Ms. Burning. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Todd. I just want to thank everybody for the opportunity to present this project on behalf of Epic Companies. Today we're going to just kind of step through, the nice thing is we have an example of what we're proposing. We have a very similar project in West Fargo, and so we'll be able to talk about that and just kind of step through. It comes in a lot of pieces, a lot of different components of it, and I have other folks from our team as well, and really it's Lance who's here. It's his project. He grew up in Argyle and has spent a lot of time in Grand Forks, and so we have 3 different people that work under me to head up developments, so you'll see a lot of Lance in the future, and so we'll just go through it, and any questions or clarifications, feel free. Oh, I do this, don't I? Oh, they give me the technology stuff. I got it. Okay, Epic is kind of new to Grand Forks. We've got a couple buildings downtown, smaller ones, the old Sanders building, and then the mill. Both those are doing really well. But really, the bigger picture of Epic is bigger mixed-use developments, and we're in 10 different communities, or actually more than 10. Right now, today, we have 20 plus, and by the end of next summer, I'm sure we'll be hitting 30. And our goal is clearly not to take over and be the biggest developer or anything like that. It's just what we do. We do about 100 to 140 million a year, and if the average is 15 million a project, you can do the math. We're 9 or 10 projects a year, and currently have over 250,000 of commercial square feet, and we're over 800 residential units, and we self-manage all of our projects, and really complete in-house on the management side and development side, until we get into engineering and architecture and things like that. So it kind of gives you a scope. We're based out of West Fargo. That's where I started about 9 years ago. And it's just been slowly growing. We have 30 plus employees. Most of them are in West Fargo, but some work remote as well, Bismarck and places like that. Just gives you a kind of a feel for who we are. We work well with a couple other mixed-use developers in Fargo and just kind of share the same vision. I don't like doing my own. Okay, the location is I always put this slide in here because I've been to some of these, and it gets back to, some people on the panel might not know exactly what we're talking about, but this is really easily identifiable, and that's the townhouse Muddy River location. I've known Kevin and Craig for years, and way back in the Ralph days, working together, and there were some people from the Grand Forks area that came and toured the lights, and city officials, city leaders, just a group of people, including Kevin and Craig, and said, you know, this is what we need. We need to get a derivative of the lights in downtown Grand Forks, and would you be interested in doing it? And we are very interested in it. It's in the Renaissance Zone. It's in the Opportunity Zone. And frankly, we have a lot of investors that come from this part of the state on both sides of the line, in Minnesota and in North Dakota. And if we can keep more money local, we're always interested in that. And so we're ready to take on this project. And so we'll step through it here fairly quickly. And then at the end, if there's any questions, we'll go from there. Thank you.
Good afternoon. At the Beacon, we're proposing 3 7-story buildings. It'll definitely change that landscape of downtown Grand Forks, and we believe for the better. Each building will have commercial space on the first floor. We've already received quite a bit of interest in bar, restaurant, as well as office space from area businesses and others. We have residential units in 2 of the buildings for sure, and condos in 1 of them. The way we do apartments is a little bit different. We try to have a lot of technology in our buildings. We like to work with, excuse me, we do a lot of research and development when we look at condos and apartments. We visit Twin Cities, Sioux Falls areas, try to keep up with latest trends and make our living experiences the best for our residents. All of the buildings would have underground parking, which is great because on our site we do have parking, and we look to utilize the parking ramps in the nearby blocks. But what that does is doesn't take away from those visiting the area to visit retail or the events that we have going on. Modern amenities that I mentioned real quick, I'm going to have Mackenzie Olson step in. She'll tell you a little bit about how our apartments differentiate themselves from other ones that may be in the area at this time.
All right, I'll take this off for a second here. So as Lance mentioned, we are talking about apartments and condos, and one thing that we have noticed is with our apartments a lot of people say they have a condo type feel, and that's because of our 2-story unit concept. So we've been known to do 1-bed studios, 2 bedrooms, and then the 2-story 2 bedrooms, which has been very popular with most of our buildings in downtown West Fargo, and then at the lights, of course, and we're also developing them in downtown Fargo, along with we have some in Bismarck. So it's something that we're excited to bring to the area because it's a newer concept. Along with that, some other things that we offer is fitness room, community room, conference room. We have rooftop patio. A lot of those amenities that the people that live there really like, because they don't just feel like they're confined to their 560 square feet, 1 bedroom, for instance. They're able to walk around, be able to meet their neighbors, and have that community type feel. Upscale amenities is really important to us, as Lance mentioned, the technology, and with that, having secure fob systems, camera systems, and Amazon Hub, which if you haven't heard of that, it's where your packages get delivered, you type in a code. So anything kind of that attracts those younger professionals, because they really seem to find that stuff to be where they, they want to move where they have that stuff. Free Wi-Fi is another big thing that we've been incorporating in a lot of our residential spaces, and the tenants really enjoy that. So just the style, feel of our units and being able to offer that upscale feel, but for not the price with the residential units, has been very popular for us with the residential units. So we'll turn it over to Lance.
I wish I was as good a public speaker as her, too, by the way. Okay, kind of the big difference in our development is the center plaza. This city-owned space would be 40,000 square feet. I'll compare it a lot to the lights in West Fargo, as Todd mentioned. What we see in this plaza is a space that is usable by many different events. If it's a concert, if it's a movie night for families, if it's a trade show, if it's anything. We do a lot of great things on infrastructure, from power, gas, and water, to allow events of any size to fit. The public parking and auxiliary event space, we do have a parking lot on the east side of the development, and that will not only be used for parking, but also for those shows that outgrow the event space that we're offering. At 40,000 square feet, We can fit probably 3,000 to 4,000 people in that space for an event, but hopefully we come across events that would outgrow that and use additional space, not only in our development, but down, all through downtown. In West Fargo, we have a great little water feature. It's not the typical fun water park where kids come and there's buckets dumping water. It's more of a kind of a background feature that we see families stop by and run through the sprinkler, and it's a nice touch and something I think would work well here. Art is something that's very important to Epic. In all of our developments and buildings, we try to represent local artists, give opportunities for them to showcase their work. Recently, we had an art event in October for local artists in the West Fargo area, and it was a great opportunity for them to showcase their fine work, especially over the last few months that they've not been able to do so. Seasonal flexibility. This space will be able to have a concert in the spring, a movie night in the summer, Oktoberfest in the fall, and skating and curling and broomball tournaments in the winter. So a lot of flexibility with this space. Just to touch on a few of the events, this is a great picture. We were able to work with the Fargo Community Theater. Because of COVID, they didn't have a place to have their event this past summer. However, with the restrictions being different for outdoors, they were able to utilize our space. I think they had about 5,000 people throughout the week come to the musical, and it worked so well that they've actually booked for this summer and beyond. So we're excited to have them there. It's a great space for high school arts programs. Again, very flexible. Fitness classes, acoustic nights, concerts, food truck events, speaker series. We had PJ Fleck come and speak this summer for an event. We had Sawyer Brown, dueling pianos, many community events. It's based on community events, but there's just so much that we can bring there. Car shows, private events, and more. Management. In West Fargo, we created a nonprofit called West Fargo Events. On that board are 2 members from the school district, 2 members from the park district, and 2 members from the city council. We like to replicate a similar design in Grand Forks. What that does is make sure that all those entities have ownership in how this is managed. Programming, we just went through a list of the things that the space will be able to do. Epic Events is an internal promotion company that is owned by Epic, and what we do is we work on at-risk events. It's tough for a nonprofit to pay a band or a comedian or something a down payment and have that risk on their books. Just works better to have a promoter, and we're not by any means saying we'd be the only promoter. We'd invite other concert promoters, other event promoters. We see it as just a way to help the development and obviously the buildings surrounding it. Revenue streams to support. In West Fargo, we have a couple different streams that help support the programming that happens in that space and pays for the management of that space. We have a video marquee, which is highlighted on this slide. That is a great tool that we use to not only promote activities that are happening within the plaza, but also to sell sponsorships to support those activities. CAM fees. With our model, the commercial tenants at Epic, the 3 buildings that would be managed by Epic, a portion of those common area maintenance fees each month would go towards a budget item for, again, programming and management of the space. Charitable gaming has been a great fundraiser for West Fargo Events, and the bar restaurant that's at the Lights currently is or houses gaming for West Fargo Events, and that's been a great funding source. And then naming rights and sponsorship. There's there's a lot of opportunities for event sponsors through the infrastructure, the power of the towers and the different areas within the plaza to hold sponsorship places. And I'm going to have Mackenzie come back up and talk about why Grand Forks.
All right. Why not Grand Forks, right? Kind of like Todd mentioned, a lot of our staff and a lot of people that work at Epic, they have deep connections to Grand Forks, and they're all kind of in this mode where they're like, get this thing built so we can get our hockey home. So as mentioned on the slide, with the community here, there's an average age of 28.7. What a great age to get people to stick around the area. You know, the commercial and residential will increase traffic, in turn increasing the commerce. That age likes things to do, they like amenities, they like to be able to have walkable areas and park their car, go have supper, go to the boutique in the shop next door and be able to walk around. So we're going to be able to bring more people to the area having this development. We talked a little bit about this being an on-tap market. With this mixed-use complex, we do have the Mill and Epic Place, downtown Grand Forks, that we recently have remodeled. They both have residential and commercial. They've been a huge thing for us. We've had a ton of people interested in them, and people are really interested in, why you chose to remodel it this way with the commercial and the residential. And that's because you have things to do. You have this live, work, and play environment. It turns into this community area where people are able to go to bed at night, go to work in the morning. You don't even have to start your car. And we found that to be very popular with a lot of our buildings, and especially in the lights where we have the skyways where people are able to park and walk through and not even have to go outside. And with Grand Forks being the first community to bring a grocery store downtown, what an awesome feature for Grand Forks. I mean, you're able to get your services and goods all still in the downtown area. Revitalization, this will be a city-owned space, so it's going to be open, used by the public, have community events. A lot of people take pride in their community. They take pride in the community of Grand Forks. I have so many friends that their destination location is Grand Forks. They're excited to come here. There's so much going on. It's not even hockey. There's curling tournaments. There's everything, the concerts that they've had in downtown. Being able to have something to go to and look forward to, they all seek out to go to Grand Forks. And then also, we mentioned this earlier, but just kind of going on this location is in the Renaissance and Opportunity Zone, which is going to help with taxes for a lot of the business, and it aligns perfectly with the Grand Forks Downtown Action Plan. So one thing that is great about Grand Forks is there's already so many great things here. It's a great community. There's people that take a lot of pride in it, everyone that lives here, and so all that this development will do is hopefully add to that and kind of build a little bit more of that momentum that Grand Forks already has going. Just with the driving more activity of the area to more traffic, people, things to do, everyone likes to be able to have something to look forward to and something to do. So why downtown? This kind of goes off to it being the main drag. People want to live downtown. With that average age too, that's the perfect age of people that are wanting to live downtown. They want to work downtown. They crave the downtown experience. It's a beautiful downtown. Working with a little bit of the DDA in downtown and Blue Weber, we've noticed too, they've been able to do great things for downtown. Being able to bring businesses down here recently with CDIC Run and filling up a lot of that commercial space and activating it and talking to a lot of the commercial tenants downtown, seeing what they need, how that can help. That's just huge. That just shows how much they care about and how much they want things to continue to happen down here. And this development will enlarge the footprint that we have down here as well, kind of extending the space a little bit. And then increasing the vibrancy, this is really big for retaining a lot of those young professionals and people that are coming here, moving here for college and then moving out. We want them to stay. We want to be able to have something that they want to stay for, and they all have such great degrees. A lot of them went to graduate school, medical school, so if we can keep those people in the community and keep them employed here and living here, it just kind of creates more of a feel for everyone that this is the place to be, this is where people are going to stay, and bigger things will happen because those are always the next generation that creates the next big thing, right? And we're creating a better quality of life for them, having the offerings such as a place like the Beacon. Pedestrian oriented, this is a walkable district. People want to feel safe with the lighting, the style. They're able to go from business to business, and that's something that you see in the downtown areas. And another thing I have that complements the event spaces and the downtown events. There's been some great downtown events here, whether it's been the Farmers Market, the Arts Fest, the Food to Table event, really just a lot of things that we just think are already great, so why not just make them better, having another spot for them to be able to access, use the plaza space, be able to extend the already events that they have, and then bringing that more energy, keeping the money local. We did do a study with Maxfield, and we found that more people are looking to live and move to the area, and we actually found with the condos that more people are looking for condos, and that's kind of where we decided that condos would be another good fit. So it's not only residential units, it's also going to be that buying and having that ownership, and keeping as many people as we can to be around the downtown area and enjoying the downtown, what all there is to offer with the commercial, and being able to keep those businesses flourishing and people to access and using them. We find that to be super important, and that's a big reason that where the beacon with where it is just going to complement everything that's already down here. So next we'll turn it over to Todd, and he's going to touch on the next slide here.
And then we're done, right? Why our TIF makes sense. And I think that's really important. A vast majority of the money that we're asking for is going to be items that you can touch and feel, and that can be used by the community. It's not going all underground or anywhere else. We need some of the money to acquire the land and demo the building and take care of any environmental issues. But then after that, it's going into a plaza that then, end of the day, will be owned by the city. It'll be managed in some form that we talked about, but it's different. It's creating spaces, and that's what we do. I invite you to check up on us. We started this concept 5-6 years ago, and it's really grown, and we have lots of communities asking for us for different levels of community spaces, and so I just want you to keep that in mind. The TIF money is not going into our financial model, it's going into public space. I think that's really, really important. Even if you look at our sheet and it says land cost, our buildings will buy the land, and that money will go right back into creating a public space. So it's really, really important that we get through that. The valuation, I think, is critical as well. We're proposing to do a minimum of $50 million of development over and above the current value of that land, and frankly, it could be a little bit more than that. We're asking for an 80-20, and 20% of 50 is 10 million, and without the plaza, the space, it just won't happen. You could end up with $8 to $10 million there. So we kind of backed into that and said, look, this is what would normally go in a place like this, and I'm not insinuating that there wouldn't be a TIF request on the $10 million project. So it's crucial to get to the 50 million plus type of development, and but we want to raise the value of the whole downtown. We want to raise the tax roll of the whole downtown and create more value and more demand and create a really strong core. I think that's extremely important. The timeline, real quick, we want to start as soon as we can. We're ready to go. If we can demo it and then start building 1 and building 2. The value of those 2 will be in that 30 million range, probably a little bit more. And then we'll go right through the summer and into winter. So if we can get an early start, that helps a lot for us to stay on target and move forward. We'd start the plaza in April of 2022, and really everything in the fall, early winter, buildings 1, building 2, and the plaza would be online. We're conservative on our timelines, but by winter of 2022, you'd have the plaza open and the buildings open. And in the middle of our summer, we'd start building number 3, but we'd be functional basically in 2 years from right now is what we're looking to do. That's it. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it. Sorry if we went a little long. And I do want to say one other thing real quick is thanks to the city staff. This has been under, I won't say duress, but it's been quick. And we've had scheduled meetings every week. We've stuck to them. We've had planning, we've had engineering, we've had Todd's team, financials. I've just been really, really impressed. I work with a lot of different cities, and it was very organized. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Burning.
Thank you,
Good
Todd.
presentation.
And maybe we could, Council President Sandy, I think Todd has done a nice job summarizing what the deal, but Michaela, if you could just summarize what our recommendation for this particular project is.
Thanks, Todd. Right, as the EPIC team had presented this project, this one is a little unique in that the purpose for the tax increment financing and the TIF bond is to finance the public portion, the public plaza component of the project. So in our review of the project, based on looking at the individual buildings and the project as a whole, I think as the EPIC team had mentioned, and we can confirm, each of the individual buildings are projected to be self-sufficient on their own, and there's not an ability to there's not surplus revenues that are available to finance piece of this project. So the current proposal is that the public portion with an cost of between 7 and 9 million, and those numbers I'm sure will be as we move forward, would be financed with a TIF bond. And at this point, the recommendation is that 80% of the tax increment from the new development could be used to repay the debt service on those bonds. The developer has also indicated that they would, the project would be financed by the developer, at which point then the TIF bonds would take out that financing. And there are additional measures of security along the way that would include a letter of credit related to the development of the phasing of the individual buildings as phased, as well as a special assessment as additional backing on the TIF bond. So with that, as just to conclude, we feel there is a need for tax increment to finance that public portion that cannot be supported by the private portion of the project, and that the future tax increment revenues from those 3 mixed-use buildings upon completion would generate the revenues to be able to repay the debt service for the public plaza. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
That's our conclusion on that one, Council President Stanley.
Great. Should we move on to Memorial Village?
Yep, maybe go through all and then we can all have a conversation. So Memorial Village, this is what UND is really asking our local community, all of our local government agencies. Moving forward, we know higher ed is taking a series of haircuts and they certainly have gone to the well of requesting donations for facilities. But I think they're at the point of part of their bold vision is doing public-private partnerships to get their facilities renewed and in a mixed-use kind of way. And so with that, I think Ms. Mikula had a question, Council President Sandy.
Your question, yes, ma'am.
Yes, I'm noticing some of the folks are leaving, so if we're going to save questions for specific developments, that may be problematic.
Yeah, I'll make sure, I'll go grab them, make sure they don't leave.
Yeah, because I have some questions on that last one for clarification of what's being asked.
So with that, I would hand it over to Steve.
Perhaps we should just ask those questions
Okay.
now. Let's just do that.
Yes. Okay, come on. Instead of leaving, they want to make sure, we'll just ask questions before you guys leave here, so. Okay.
Ms. Mikula, you had questions, please?
I didn't want you all to lose the benefit of the questions that we might ask. So school district is where I'm coming from on all of these questions. And just to maybe frame it up for you and for the rest of the developers, the school district, it's no secret we've been looking at a need to propose a bond referendum. Going to the community and asking for an increase to property taxes is never an easy thing for a taxing authority to do. It's something we've been examining for 3 years, if not longer, and it's something that we are about to embark upon. With that, that's something that we're carrying to these assessments. I mean, we're being asked to essentially provide an abatement for these projects. We want to be good partners. We recognize the importance of economic development, but we are facing a fiscal situation that we have to manage at the school district level. One of the things that in particular we're facing is it's not just needing to sustain our current taxing rate. We need to find a way to create revenue. And school districts notoriously have very few levers we can pull. One is property tax. The other is going to state and federal funding. We have recently been notified by the state that we should be happy with a 0% increase this next fiscal biennium, and that we should anticipate that that won't even be sustained in the long run. So we don't have that lever available to us currently. So one of the things that I want to have you think about is how can we work these opportunities in a way that may create some revenue for the district. I recognize there's a need here for the development side, but if we can find a way to do some blend of percentage, maybe it's a pilot, maybe it's something else, that we can pull some levers for the district, that would be something that would make it easier for us to contemplate these projects and these requests. So I just wanted to start out by saying that, because I think that applies across the board from our standpoint. Specifically with the beacon though, so I just want to make sure I'm understanding Michaela or Todd. The ask is for a TIF bond to finance or to cover the public space. But one important thing that I heard in here is that the developer would be able to finance and carry that bond until a certain milestone in project development, at which point it'd be a bond taking out that funding. Is that correct?
You
That is
bet.
correct.
Thank you. I'll go over a couple things. Totally understand, what's going on with school districts really across the state. And we worked really close with the West Fargo School District. And I think, and we can give you information as well, but because of what we're doing, we're creating value, and like the land around the lights, has doubled and more. Rents around the lights has gone up, and all that stuff brings up value. And that's why we started with an 80-20. We didn't come in here with 100. And we ought to make it work because the school district needs something. And 20% of our value of a minimum of 50 million is a $10 million project. And that'd be assuming the $10 million project didn't ask for any TIF. And so we have to work together. And how do we raise the bar, the whole tide, not just one wave? I think that's really important. The other thing that school districts have asked us in the past, not saying Grand Forks, but where we've done business before, is who's your target market? There's nothing worse than having a whole bunch of kids living in buildings that don't generate any taxes for us right off the bat. And we don't. We don't. That's not our target. It's young professionals, especially in this condo environment. And so hopefully that frees up housing that families can live when they're ready to do that. So Snowbird's a great example. If they could go to a place that was higher in amenities, higher in qualities, and on the 7th floor, they might free up their house where families can live. So those are things we look at, and we'd welcome visiting with the school administration on talking about that and figuring out and how to work together. I think that's really important. The bond, we have a track record of working with Bank of North Dakota, and what we did is we work with a bank. The bank finances our project. As most of you know, when a bank finances $20–30 million of debt, they don't keep it in-house. They farm it out, they sell it off, and of course, one of the bigger purchasers of it is Bank of North Dakota. So they vet us. They vet our guarantee structure and all those anomalies that come with that type of financing. So by doing that, they know who we are and what we are. And what we've agreed to do is, as we create these public amenities and go vertical, it's no secret that our governor is all about going vertical and creating walkable communities. And so Bank of North Dakota backs us. So let's just use an easy number. Say we're going to develop a $7 million plaza. And we have budgets, and we vetted them with the city and the school and the park, so everybody knows what we're going forward with. Because I think there's some real opportunities for the school, with the high school and everything. We'll create a $7 million budget. They will finance that to us through the bank, and we'll have a letter of credit. And we'll systematically go through that and do draws. They do that as soon as we're financed and start digging. Then we've got that in place, because they're on the other side of the ledger, they're financing the buildings as well. So they have direct knowledge of it. Their ask, and its requirement, is that the city takes that note out with bonds or whatever funds. It could be a mixture. That's up to you guys. That's up to the city staff and leadership. And they take that $7 million out, and let's just keep it simple, with a bond. That doesn't happen until there's a certificate of occupancy. So if we go over, that's our fault. You guys are saying, look, we're going to go up to $7 million, that's it, and you move forward. And that's what we did with West Fargo. We did it in 2 phases. The parking ramp was $6.5 million. We made some decisions even within that parking ramp to create a big storeroom and a place for the Zamboni to go and things like that. And we had to work through that, because we had $6.5 million for that project, and then $7.5 or $8 million for the next piece, the Plaza. That was a $15 million with a little bit of wiggle room, and we ended up under budget. But, so we had to even move some of that stuff around. But Bank of North Dakota is very, very excited about this. Matter of fact, they've called us, we've met with them, their leadership team out of Bismarck. Todd, how much allocation are you guys going to need if these things go through? Because it's into a biennium and they need to talk about it. So I hope that gives you a picture of how we do it. We're not asking the city to give us a letter of credit or anything. We'll take care of that, but the city has to agree with Bank of North Dakota that once these buildings get a CO, we take it out. Any other questions?
Sean, thank you. Anyone else? I think, yeah, Mr. Mayor.
No, I think Ms. Mikula, brings up a great point, and I think we want to support the school districts as best we can. Regardless if there was any mismanagement in the past, there certainly hasn't been enough money going to schools in Grand Forks. And quite frankly, if we were more aggressive 10 or 20 years ago, we might be in a better spot. These projects aren't going to save the school district. Even if they came through at a full amount, there's still going to need to be some other movement. And it kind of goes back to that mill growth. We've got to need projects like that so our mill growth is quicker. 1% to 2% mill growth is not enough to support high-quality schools, especially with deteriorating buildings and shrinking enrollment. So, I'm excited. I think we need to be aggressive. This type of problem isn't going to get solved overnight. We've got to find a way to work with the school district and help them out, but it's going to be a long-term solution. And this sort of this momentum that we can gain off this can build a lot of progress, and certainly in the future, 15, 20 years when we're all gone, hopefully we're in a lot better spot.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And I think the point that you raise regarding the size of the development at an 80-20, knowing Mr. Ritterman and Mr. Tweeten, a $10 to $15 million project is probably what they would have been doing on the site. And with history dictates that they would be in here asking for an 80 or 100% TIF on this project. So keeping the 20% of the 50 million minimum
right out of the chutes
gives us almost 100% of what we would have been getting on their project.
That's how I backed into it, because it's got to work for everybody. It really does. I mean, we're going to ask the school to be a part of this, developing the plaza and amenities and things like that. We got to be partners.
Right. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other? Yes, Ms. Mock?
Maybe this is more for Todd, but since we have a town square already, are we thinking of this as a second public space going into the future? And I guess one of the issues we've talked about in the past is that there isn't really a funding mechanism for improvements to the existing town square. So would we then be having dedicated dollars for this if we take on a second public space for future improvements?
Council President Sandy and Council Vice President Mock, I think that's to be determined, and I think the city of Grand Forks will have to determine whether this is an and strategy or an or. I think a lot of the amenities that are going to go in here in the scope and scale are a lot of the things that we want to do with the town square. We struggled with putting a lot of the stuff that are going to contain it because the box is the box. So I think this is a better investment. We're going to invest $5 million in the town square, and it would have kind of looked the same with all these features. I think this is a better way forward. to do all the great things that we wanted to do in the town square. I think once this gets up and going, I think there'll have to be another conversation of, do we have this complementary town square site, or do we look forward to redevelop that site? And I think that'll have to be a conversation that will have to come over the next few years.
Yes, Mr. Mayor?
I think that's the good model that they have with this space, is that it does feed itself. It's got cams from the commercial space, it's got the naming rights, it's got charitable gaming, it's got the big billboard. So whether those gets tied into as sort of a partnership between Town Square and this space, I think it's definitely a model maybe we need to take a look at on how to fund Town Square. Or if they're brought together, maybe this finds a way to fund both with some type of a event programming similar to what they have down there.
Excellent. Other comments? Hearing none. Mr. Phelan? Memorial Village?
Memorial Village, we have Steve Birino along with the team, and let's just kick that off, Steve.
Mr. Burian, you have 30 seconds.
Good afternoon, City Council President Dana Sandy and the members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I also have with me today in person Mike Keeper from the UND facilities, virtually Dan Muse from the UND Alumni Association and Foundation, as well as Bill Chase, the athletic director from UND. I have 3 slides, one for each of them, that they will participate in the middle of the presentation. Maybe as a little bit of a departure from my 30 seconds, I think the Beacon is a really, really exciting project in this COVID-limited environment. I did get the opportunity to attend Hairball, Sawyer Brown, and dueling pianos down there this summer, and I can only imagine how neat this would be as an amenity for Grand Forks and in that downtown location that's proposed. Having said that, then I get...
We'll have John get your slides up.
Okay.
In advance.
Excuse me. There you go. Thank you. So we move now from downtown for a moment over to the University of North Dakota, which is why I have the UND reps with me today, and talk about a very exciting project on the UND campus, where we're looking at the location of the Memorial Stadium, which was constructed in 1929 as a memorial to World War I. It's served its purpose in an excellent way, but it's at the point where it's really outused its life and it's abandoned at this point. The athletes are over at the Hislop, the coaches are over at Starcher, the farmer biology building, and this is no longer in use. And so as UND had looked at a way to move forward with this project, and with the scarce capital that UND has, given some of the discussions that you provided, Board Member Mikula, similar challenges at UND, they elected to look at a public-private partnership. And they advertised for a development team to come in and look at knocking down the Memorial Stadium and replacing that with a mixed-use building. On the first floor would be commercial. Originally, it was going to be half UND athletic offices and half other commercial. At this point, as I think the UND reps will explain, they've looked at some balancing of the model, and I think the UND athletics will be taking the whole first floor and putting all the clean environment things like the coaches' offices and the meeting rooms and the film rooms and that type of thing in the public-private partnership, and then expanding the high-performance center to handle the wet type aspects, the weight room, locker rooms, that training rooms, that type of thing. The remainder then, it would be a 5-story building with underground parking. The main floor would be commercial, and the next floor would be then 250 beds of various apartment sizes from 1 to 4, and those would be catering toward upperclassmen as part of the project. If we look at the development team that's pursuing this project, named Memorial Village LLC, it's 3 alumni from the University of North Dakota. Mike Kuntz with Icon Architects is one representative, myself, and then Craig Tweeton from Community Developers. In addition to being alumni of UND, Mike was on the UND football team in the glory days. I got to throw a little bit of shot put and discus in my day, and so both of us spent a significant amount of time in and around Memorial Stadium, and it's near and dear to our heart. And we're very excited to be participating in a project like this where we can help UND, the city of Grand Forks, the region, and the state. Looking at where we're at, if we drive over Columbia Road to the north, we know that Memorial Stadium is right off to our right, and so this lighter green dash box shows one concept of how you go in and replace that Memorial Stadium with a new Memorial Village LLC. Way to the right on this drawing is the existing High Performance Center, which has really turned out to be a huge asset for UND athletics, as well as a huge asset for the community as they opened up and provided different opportunities from COVID testing to youth track meets to numerous other events. When they built the High Performance Center, they recognized that they didn't have the support areas associated with that, so they always knew there would be an expansion of that High Performance Center. That's shown in kind of the blue-green on this drawing. And then as part of the project, Mike Kuntz came up with the idea of putting in the Hawkway. And so Memorial Stadium is a historically significant building. It's gone through a lot of review. There'll be a lot of pictorial documentation to make sure that that's all represented before it's taken down. But as one way to salvage some of the character of that, the north wall along the track and field shown at the top of this drawing will be preserved. And then about 8 feet from there, there'll be a glass wall put on the south side of it, and then it'll be fully enclosed with access control. And as you will provide the opportunity for the students, the athletes, and the public to move from the the Memorial Village site over to the High Performance Center without ever having to go outside. The glass area will allow you to look back at those two buildings as well as the track and field, and then it's envisioned that on the back of that brick wall there might be some opportunity to put some other pictures up recognizing Memorial Stadium, former athletes, and that type of thing. At this point, I'd like to turn things over to Mike Pieper to talk about UND's administrative vision.
So on the top of the slide, I just highlighted the one UND strategic plan.
Mr. Pieper, would you come up to the...
Goal number 3.
Thank you.
It has to do with enrollment, and it's active item. It's progressively upgrade campus facilities and ambiance. And you may ask, how does that fall within enrollment? And what we know at UND as a comprehensive research institution, we're actually very strong within the region. We've seen good growth year over year with our professional programs. We've seen good growth, double-digit growth in our graduate programs. We've seen good growth recently with transfer students. Students are starting elsewhere and coming to UND to finish. And in the region, we're strong from an undergraduate on-campus enrollment, but when you look at other comprehensive research institution, our undergraduate on-campus enrollment's a little bit soft. And what we know about those students, especially undecided students, the first impression of the community and the campus along with amenities. And so the university has made great investments. We have a great wellness center for those students. We're finishing up a great student union for those students. We've invested in the food service in Wilkerson. And what we have is a very good student life experience with our student housing office, but we have very poor housing facilities. And so one of our strategies that we're looking at is how do we fix that? When I look at the numbers, we were over 5,000 beds on campus to serve our students. We're serving in the low 2,000s currently, and in some respect that's a good thing. The private sector had stepped in, provided that service, and our students are utilizing those services. So what we did is we split our housing solution, said we're just going to solve our housing solution on campus for those freshmen and those upperclassmen that want that traditional student life, RA, hall director experience. And so we're taking over 5,000 beds, we're going to right size it to under 2,000 beds and provide those services. We think that'll help us continue to recruit students that will use the amenities of the community and also move off campus and move into private housing. What we wanted to do for those upperclassmen that have also told us, hey, we want grade A apartments, we want the amenities. We'd prefer, what we hear from our students is we'd prefer to live on or near campus, or we'd prefer to live downtown, but it's just not available. So what we've done in our planning is we're trying to leverage some assets that we've created on campus that aren't generating any taxes at the moment and really no use for the university. And our first project is the stadium. And so we think this is a good partnership. They can provide the apartments that our students are asking for. But this project was unique in the sense that it's in our athletic district. We have a need to finish the HBC. That also has good community benefit. About a year ago, we finally put seats in the HBC, and we've seen the utilization and activity in that building go up from a community standpoint with track meets and that. The building still doesn't have adequate bathrooms for large events. It still doesn't have locker rooms and those things. So our foundation has taken it upon themselves. They've gotten state approval. They're actively fundraising for that. But how could we help them reduce the size of that project and leverage an asset? And that's really what this project does. So we talked to the developer about, can you build us the spaces we need on the first floor? We'll lease to own. But athletics is not a cost, athletics is not a profit center for the university, it's a cost center. It's subsidized by the students in the university. So we're trying to leverage that asset again in a way that won't increase athletic costs and can give them the spaces that they need. And this project, I believe, will do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pieper.
Dan, I'm trusting that you're out there when we'll grab the next slide.
Got caught with my mute button on. Sorry, folks. Hi, I'm Dan Muse. I'm the Vice President of Development at the UND Foundation. I'm one of the co-leads on this project within our organization, and just wanted to voice some of the facts behind this and support this effort, this creative effort to develop the phase 2 of the High Performance Center in conjunction with this project. The UND Foundation has received our approvals from for the phase 2 of this project from our Board of Directors, the State Board of Higher Education, and the North Dakota Legislature. In cooperation and partnership with the university, we recognize that we're going to need private dollars to fund athletic facilities going forward. The UND Foundation does have a successful track record with a project of similar size and scope as this phase 2 project in phase 1, and that this P3 really helps our feasibility, the momentum, and meeting the urgency and the timeline needed for this project.
Thank you, Dan. Bill?
Appreciate it, Steve and Dan, and thank you to the committee for having us today. Steve did a really good job articulating the vision of the project, so I won't go too deep into that, but I do think this is an opportunity for us to house 10 of our 17 programs. Certainly when the addition of the High Performance Center occurs, the administration and offices and our student athlete support for all 17 programs would be in the P3. So it's just it's a unique way of thinking through how do you go over the Columbia Bridge to the north, look to the right, and see that whole area, I guess, to another level. So all of our programs would either be or over at the Ralph and Betty, 5 programs, or down at Choice, the 2 tennis programs. So we're excited about it. We think this is a vision for us. It's an economical way for us to really impact our student athlete, the competitive nature, the recruiting nature, the retention nature for really the next 50 years. So we're excited about it.
Thank you, Mr. Shaves.
Thank you, Mike, Dan, and Bill. I'll just wrap things up with a little bit more presentation on the project and then summarize the need for the TIF and then turn things over to Michaela. This is one rendering of the potential building. I think this was done before UND decided to take all of the clean parts of athletics, so I think this footprint will actually be a bit bigger, but this is looking at it from the northwest, and so you can see it's a very nice building. It's consistent with much of the architecture on the UND campus. That first floor would all be for the University of North Dakota Athletic Department. There'd be underground parking, likely access through somewhere on the south end of the building, and then you have the 4 floors of mixed-use apartments as part of that. And then off to the left, you can see the existing wall that represents what we're going to call the Hawkway moving forward. If we look at this then from the northeast, just looking at the back side, you can now see the other side of that building. You can see how it accesses the track and the field on the outdoor side, and then you can see a much better illustration of what the Hawkway would look like with the glass walls and the enclosures and the ability and the elements to move from one building to the other, and also have that nice visual representation of everything. If we look at the need for the TIF, the developers feel very strongly that UND has put a good vision together, and we want to be a part of that vision. The plan is to, as Mike indicated, is to condo out the first floor. UND is a non-taxable entity, so as a result, that first floor would not have property taxes inherently. As you look at the building, and was described by some of the things that Todd Burning indicated earlier, we are responsibility for the demolition of that building and some utility challenges. We're putting quite a bit of money into the skin of the building to make it consistent with the look of the UND, as opposed to something that we might put on the south end of Grand Forks. We're looking at putting that Hawkway in, and there's even overtures of considering putting a overhead walkway in between this building and the parking structure to the north, so that we could have complete contained access to the building. As a result, when you look at the pro forma without property tax abatement, and you look at the pro forma with property tax abatement, it would not allow the project to move forward feasibly, and I think Michaela will talk further about that. And so our original request was for a 20-year pilot tax abatement at 100% of the taxes that were generated. In closing, this is a really neat opportunity for basically a public-private partnership, where you'd have the University of North Dakota, the City of Grand Forks, and the other tax entities working with the developer to simultaneously bring together a new memorial stadium, as well as enhance the ability to move forward with High Performance Center 2. It will take a building that really you can go over there and literally see the bowing of the walls and things right now, and so it really is a building that's outlived its useful life, and so we'll have a vital redevelopment of that. Will allow UND, as I noted, to move forward with their aggressive and strong vision for their athletic campus. I think, as Bill or Mike explained, it's very complementary to how UND is looking at housing, where they'll downsize to what they need for that kind of classic approach, and then this would allow for students and even people off campus that want to see this other environment. And in summary, we have a very motivated local alumni group excited to help the entire region with this project.
Thank you, Mr. Burrian. Mr. Phelan, comments?
I'd have I'd have Michaela give the recommendation, and taking in mind what Ms. Michaela said about, hey, we need something up front. Right now, if you look at, I think what she's going to describe, Michaela, it's an effective 90% tax exemption over 20 years. The tax, we looked at years 11 through 20, you would get some monies back. But maybe taking that into mind, just so you know what we're going to describe as a 90% exemption, and there'll be, I'm sure there'll be some discussion on how that should be staggered. So with that, I'd ask Michaela kind of how we came up with the results and the recommendation on this project.
Thank you, Ms. Hewitt.
Thank you. Again, the developer had submitted an application for financial assistance. And in their application, they were looking for the maximum exemption for this project. The unique nature about this project is it being a split between the residential and the commercial, with the commercial space being occupied by by UND. So the focus for the incremental property taxes is on the residential component. The developer has asked for a exemption up to the maximum term to assist with cash flow. And again, the purpose for doing so is increasing the cash flow to be able to support both the debt and the equity repayment for this project. In reviewing the financials from the developer with the application, we can support that there is a need for financial assistance based on the current performance of the project and the additional extraordinary costs that are proposed to be financed with this project. There's developer has identified approximately 5.9 million of costs related to this project. That includes some of the public improvements, including the Hawkway, Skyway connection, some additional architectural enhancements, some utility relocations, as well as the demolition and environmental costs related to redeveloping the sites. So based on the extraordinary costs for the project and the performance post-construction and when it's operational, the current financing structure as being proposed would be, as Todd mentioned, an effective 90% exemption with an 100% exemption for the early years, up to 10 years of the project, to assist with that, with cash flow performance, and then reducing that exemption for the remaining term to have a blended 90%, again, with trying to recommend levels of assistance that would allow this project as proposed to proceed, but also trying to get a portion of the taxes back on the tax rolls. And so again, that's the reasoning for the step down of the exemption.
Thank you for that, Ms. Hewitt. Any other comments or questions? Any questions for the developers? Yes?
Michaela, you can either speak to this or certainly you can speak to it as well. So in here, you know, we have an IRR over a 10-year period of approximately 10 to 15%. Is that what you saw over a 10-year period, between 10 and 15% IRR on this pro forma?
That is correct.
Can I ask whether it's closer to 10 or 15 in 10 years?
I am pulling it up. I don't have it in front of me, but I am pulling it up.
One of my other questions is, and you'd mentioned lease to own for the university on the first floor. So is this all in, I mean, so it's contemplated that a lease by a state agency is then a tax exempt ownership interest, or is it still a privately owned but leased to the state? So there's some benefit there to the private owner.
Ms. Mikula, I'm certainly not an expert in this area, but as we've done the due diligence on it, as long as there's an automatic reversion on the back end to the University of North Dakota, we understand that creates the situation where it's deemed a UND asset and then would not be taxable as on property tax basis. If it were just strictly a lease, it would be viewed as a private ownership and be a taxable event.
Mr. Berry, why don't we have Mr. Hodek comment? He is an expert on this.
Thank you. Paul Hodek, City Assessor, just so everyone knows who I am. We would treat that lease to own just like we would treat a contract for deed. And in a contract for deed, we consider the ownership as of the beginning of the contract and not at the end. So that's how we looked at this as well. It's in my mind, it's a contract for deed by another name.
So even if there's outs in that contract, meaning it could be canceled at any time and revert back to the private?
Well, we haven't
retained by the private?
We haven't exactly seen the contract, but we did make it clear to the developers that that's what we expect to happen. It's a lease for a certain number of years, and then the property gets deeded to in a condo setting.
So that would be there probably are some constraints on what that contract has to have in it, or limitations on what the cancellation could be.
It would be like a condo.
Okay.
So I don't know if we've gotten our answer from Ms. Hewitt yet.
Based on the current assumptions in the pro forma, the projected rate of return over the first 10-year period is on the lower range of the 10 to 15%.
Yeah, Mr. Brzezinski.
Ms. Hewitt, I just have one question. You might not be able to answer it complete, but they're looking for 100% for the first 10 years and 80% for the second 10 years. I guess depending upon if they can cash flow and their interest rate on their financing. If property values increased quicker than inflation, wouldn't they actually do better off if it was just 90% for the whole 20 years?
That could be, that was something we explored in several conversations with the developer. They had indicated they were concerned about the early years cash flow related to post-construction and stabilization of the project. But that's certainly something that, following this conversation, we can have greater conversations regarding.
Sounds good. Yeah, I think just something to look at, something to think about. Certainly, also a stadium, also a place that I spent many summer days too. So I'm excited to see this project go forward.
And Council President Sandy, this is probably intuitive, but right now it's obviously a tax exempt property, so it would be bringing eventually the whole significant portion to the tax rolls that are not currently on.
Is that part of the strategic plan of the university, is to not own its student housing any longer?
So the university, and in higher ed in general, has overbuilt. And so the governor, the legislature, our system is really looking at, how do we improve the utilization of our facilities? In general, higher ed is about a 50% utilization of their classrooms and space. So we've been shrinking the footprint of our campus, and when we do that, we've created very nice sites for mixed-use development. This was a site we've identified the ability to do something on Memorial Stadium. There's a couple acres across from the brand new Union. In a few years, we'll hopefully have Columbia Hall as a redevelopment. So we'd like to turn those sites over for taxable private market rate apartments. And those, we don't have this caveat that we have with athletics, that we need athletic space. It's within our district. It's where we'd want to build. The other ones would more or less be straight up mixed rate on a ground lease.
So the university's
So we want to
toward
maintain,
getting out of ownership of housing.
we want to maintain we have a mandatory live-on requirement.
Right.
We want to provide adequate spaces for those students to increase our enrollments and help the community and the university. There is a small percentage of students that still want that traditional student housing, even as sophomores or juniors, some international students. So we'll have a small section of that we provide apartment-based, like we do now, but it'll be dramatically less beds.
Great. So that,
Between affiliated and non-affiliated also. So whoever became the affiliated portion.
sure.
So
but
affiliated,
ultimately, where I'm going with this is there, in addition to this, over time, there will be significant amounts of property coming on the tax rolls on UND campus because it will be owned by others than the university.
as long as the local private development community are willing to construct it, yes.
Right. Very good. Thank you. Appreciate it.
If I could, just one comment. I asked earlier about school districts. So I spent 15 years as the chief financial and operating officer in K-12. So I've always sat on that side. This is the first time on this side. But I think, one of the things that I see in the beacon that would be positive from a school district, again, is the theater art aspect at really no investment by the district. But when I worked on referendums and did financing, one of the things I always did was I shaped my debt service to take advantage of my TIFs. I had TIFs coming off in a year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. So as I'm shaping my referendum debt over 30 years, I'm still taking advantage of new TIFs on the back end of my referendums. And if you really want to look at a TIF that worked, Google Verona Public Schools, a suburb of Madison. Epic is a company that probably has 90% of the world's medical records underneath in its databases. I think they just passed something like a $400 million referendum that was basically covered by Epic coming off of their TIF. So they do work. Thanks.
That's great information. Thank you very much. Any other comments or questions? Mr. Phelan, shall we move on?
Next one up is Lions, and it's great to have Mr. Miscavige here. This one is a pretty tight project. We've worked with Mr. Miscavige and his team quite a bit on this one. This one, we really have pushed the developer to include commercial space on the first and second floors. And that's going to come with additional risk and additional costs that I think Mr. Miscavige will talk about. The other thing with the city of Grand Forks is we need to look at our Herald lot that we do own as the city of Grand Forks, and also there's some alley improvements. So there is some publicness of the city of Grand Forks above and beyond this incentive that we'll have to discuss as part of this project. So with that, John, and we'll have John Bernstrom pull up your presentation.
Mr. Miscavige, good afternoon.
Mr. Sandy.
Thanks for coming today.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Thanks for dressing up.
My mom picked it out.
There you go, you just click through.
Well, Lions Auto, this started with land acquisitions in 2018 and 2019 to try acquire most of the block in front of us here, directly across from City Hall. And it would require one other acquisition that the city or JDA owns, would be the Grand Forks Herald parking lot. And then we would be looking to relocate that parking embedded in the first floor of our parking structure. So I'd like to touch a little bit about our company. Northridge Construction, we build and develop senior housing, multi-housing, and hospitality assets. So far we've built in 12 states and constructed nearly $1 billion in property. This project's pretty special to us because it's looking for us to move our corporate office back downtown. And so it's pretty exciting for our company and our staff to, I guess, have a workplace downtown. A little bit about the project is that when we build our assets, we try to build really high quality property, and with that we try to embody what Epic had defined as well as the live, work, play environment, and that is amenity rich assets. And with that it can be community spaces. Our South End property has outdoor pools, but all of that really is about I guess the tenant experience. One thing that we're excited about with the tenant experience that the downtown development does bring is that I really think the construction of all these assets currently that are going on, from Hugo's to JLG's building to the Epic properties, and they all really play off each other. And one thing that really defines a community is the fabric of a downtown is about the vibrancy. And if we can get enough residential density in the downtown, it does really breathe a lot of life into that community and create a lot more positive energy that I think both employers benefit from. Number one, by it's a place that you can attract and retain talent, and they say, hey, I like this community, I'd love to live there. And just also, I mean, it's your nightlife of what people are going to do. As you look around our community, I mean, I think all of us can attest that our retail corridor's been pretty much decimated both by COVID and or Amazon. And I think bringing some of these commercial spaces back downtown does give a lot of play to the local business owner and the boutique shop owners to really take a foothold down here. So we're excited about that. Our main floor commercial space, it's consistent with the downtown action plan. It's something that's not consistent with Northridge's development mission. We really have never been a commercial developer per se in retaining, just call it national retail clients. So we've tried to focus our efforts on converting local businesses to come back downtown and or play off kind of what our building would be. And with Central High School across the street, we really feel there's a great opportunity for coffee shops, restaurants, pizza by the slice, boutique restaurants, just stuff that I think both our tenants, students, and other staff in the downtown core I think would enjoy. So I'm going to go to our project here. So this illustration is the first floor of the project, and as you can see along 4th Street, and Second Avenue, our intent is to have retail that would be facing the street fronts. And on Second Avenue, the building is recessed roughly 15 feet. And our intent there is basically that those retail storefronts would have outdoor dining spaces. And that's where we'd like to congregate kind of all of the restaurant and or coffee shops so they can have some outdoor seating.
Sorry, Mr. Muscat, is that covered by the second floor?
The patios would not be, but everything else would be.
Got it, thank you.
The main floor parking deck there, it currently shows 55 spaces. I've spent a little bit of time with it. We think we can get it to roughly 58 spaces. The first floor, 50 of those spaces would go to the city of Grand Forks to more or less recoup those spaces taken from the Grand Forks Herald. This would be covered parking and conditioned parking that would basically be at the city's discretion then if they wanted to do what they do in Fargo, which would be basically paid parking for patrons of the downtown. Any questions? So off of first floor, our first floor ramp would then drop below grade, and we would have 91 stalls below grade for our tenants. So 24 feet in the air would be the podium deck, and this is where we would establish the residential units. At this level, we would have a clubhouse, so the U would be facing the back. Our initial concept does show the U facing the front. We decided to turn it to the back and take advantage of the river views. With 24 feet, we'll be able to see over the dike. And I think with the alleyway and those parking lots, we'll have pretty good unobstructed views. Our unit mix is 32 studios, 12 one-bedrooms, and 62 two-bedrooms. So we're trying to capture, our previous concept really was a heavy ones and studio-based. We're really looking for kind of a good blend that would focus on whether it be a small family and or active young adults as well is really what our target market would be. And these would be floors 3 and 4. And then our 5th floor, we've removed 2 of the corner units in the back of the U, and those would have club rooms with rooftop patios for the tenants to congregate and utilize at their discretion. This image depicts the city lot that we do not currently own and are in discussions with the city on. Everything else we own. This was the initial rendering concept when we were keeping the building to the initial lot that we did own. I think with some of the updates and the discussions that we're looking at, we'd probably change a lot of the aesthetics to make it less modern and kind of dull it down to, I would just say, be a little more nostalgic to the downtown features. So I would open that up to comments and questions.
Thank you.
And we'll have, Michaela, if you could kind of give the broad overview of how to get this project across the finish line.
I can do that. Again, they submitted an application looking for 100% tax incentive over the maximum term for this project. On reviewing all the project components of it, based on the analysis, again, looking at the project costs that are financing it, including the acquisition, demolition, there's fairly significant improvements that need to occur on the site prior to construction occurring, and those additional costs, incorporating those with the performance of the project. This one, based on our review of looking at the lease rates for both the commercial and the residential space, and we also had pretty detailed conversations about the performance of the commercial space and the amount of square footage that's being included in this project, as well as the size the size of it and location, that looking at the numbers and the performance of it, the recommendation is 100% of the exemptions for the maximum term. And again, that's based on the cash flow is tight in this project in the early years, and even with growth, it's still relatively tight over the term beyond 10 years. And again, with the size of the project, the costs that were required to be put into it, and the projected performance. But just to reiterate, on this one, the recommendation is to look at 100% exemption for the full term.
Mr. Piscavage, do the numbers work better if you go larger or smaller? Should you do 9 stories? Does that make it pencil out better, or?
Well, yes, Dana, density changes everything. So, you know, what we really tried to focus on is we look at market absorption and how much, you know, the community can actually absorb. If we were seeing 3 to 4% population growth, we'd put 270 units on this. But I think we have to be realistic of what the market can absorb, because, you know, the inverse thing can happen is that if we put too much supply in the market and you don't hit your rental performance, you'll actually see collapsing rent prices. And so it's, you know, it's something that we try to really focus on and say that we need to have the right amount of density to make the project and the amenities work, but at the same time keeping that in balance with really what the community can, you know, support for occupancy growth. So.
Yes, Mr. Carpenter.
A question, you know, when you said that you need the absorption rate and that, and you considered, you know, how fast that's going to take place and what you should be doing now. When you did that, did you include all these other projects that are happening that are going to be coming on, you know, if these all go forward, what impact that might have on your plans?
So Doug, currently we have 171 units under construction on the south end of town, and what we try to do is we roughly feel that the city can probably grow to 250 units a year. And, you know, when you look at those numbers, you know, some of them might come in 1 year. You might see 350 in 1 year, and then it kind of takes a pause, and there'll be a 60 and a 70 unit building built. But I would say that if Hugo's was being built, our building was being built, and Epic, every one of their buildings were being built all at once, I think we would have issues, and I think we'd struggle to fill buildings. But, I mean, we're paying close attention to what they're doing. Our current goal is to let our property on the south end lease up and stabilize over the next 12 months. And Epic will start construction on their building, providing everything goes well. And then in 2022 is basically when we get started, and we're probably looking at anywhere from a 16 to 24 month time frame of that. So.
Thank you. Mr. Piscavage, any other comments or questions?
One thing I was going to say, you know, we've built 1,200, or built and owned 1,200 units in the community currently to date. We've never came and asked for assistance on any project ever in our history. And if the project didn't need it and the community generated $2,200 rents, we wouldn't be standing here. So I think it's, you know, it's one of those things that we feel is great for the community. Even with the, you know, the TIF assistance, from an investment standpoint, there's better places to put your capital. So if it wasn't my hometown, I would tell you we wouldn't be doing this project.
Ms. Mock?
You know, that is something that I hear a lot, is people complaining about apartments.
Always
we
have.
don't need more apartments, and why don't we ever look at something else? I assume that as a developer, you do run those numbers and pay attention to that, and you wouldn't be proposing apartments if you didn't think there was a need.
I think there's been a huge shift in the demographic landscape of a buyer versus a renter over the last 10 years. And it really is, you know, more people prefer to rent than to own. And I think that the cost of a house, you know, I'm a former home builder, and, you know, when you look at entry-level housing starting out at $350,000, that's a pretty stiff entry-level home. And it's not the builders, it's just that's the makeup of the cost and the expectations that clients have nowadays. And so I think they feel that they can, derive a better living experience through renting without, the majority of those costs.
Mr. Mayor?
So it does seem like there's a pretty substantial cost in just getting it basically to a greenfield again. I mean, without this assistance, does that kind of remove a lot of the commercial space, your opportunity to be able to put commercial space or the aesthetics? I mean, without getting this TIF, are we looking at kind of a much different building if you even built it?
Oh, most definitely. Yeah.
And I think I don't mean to speak for the city, but from my point of view, working out a deal on the parking lot is imperative, but also not unreasonable. I don't think that we have any interest in holding that over on the developers. I think we'd probably look at getting it appraised and figuring it out. So, wouldn't you agree, Mayor or Todd?
I agree on that, Council President Sandy. I think the other big bonus on this is the commercial space. And that's the riskiest part of this development, I would say. But, we've talked about a downtown tech hub. We've already got some tech firms in the Herald building. We're looking to renovate that as a tech accelerator. And we're going to need commercial space for companies to grow and develop in and around that centerpiece too. So I think that's what this building also adds, something that we couldn't build ourselves that is planned to be incorporated into this development.
I think it also, if you think out in the future with the patio seating for restaurants, all of a sudden you've got Joe Black's purchasing the hub, doing the renovation there. You've still got Toasted Frog, and it's all of a sudden you've got almost like East Grand Forks, you've got a central area where you have several different restaurants where people can go and congregate.
Yeah. That street activity is going to be huge for all investors, I think, in the downtown area.
Great. Yes? Ms. Mikula?
Michaela, same question as my last one on IRR over what 10-year period of time? And then could you provide the DCR at 100% over 20 years, what that figure is? I know you say it's over 1, but where is it at if it's over 1? And then what does it get down to if it's a 90% TIF over 20?
And Shannon, if I can just speak to that briefly, we had a discussion in regards to that, and the current underwriting in this performance based upon 3.5 debt, and historically those rates have not been in the marketplace in multifamily consistently, and that's one thing that we took into consideration, because I think we were talking that it was a 1-to-1 in basically the infancy of the project. Let's just say you get retraded at your 5 to 4% interest, your negative cash flow, and if we had mechanisms that allowed us to do 20-year debt day one at construction, which there are, HUD mechanisms, but we wouldn't build this building for another 10 years by the time they're done approving it. It's just that there is substantial risk when it comes to what those rates are at those dates and where you do lie with that. And another thing we did take into account in our performa was that our current performa is showing the commercial lease space at 95% occupancy. For performance sake, and from most of the people that we have talked to, commercial at 95% occupancy is very, very unrealistic. So that's something that we're kind of cautiously optimistic in the background, and also underwriting in there as well of hopefully being able to hit that kind of capacity.
And that's a follow-up question that I had in terms of how are they stress testing this? At 95%, that's not even, you got to do a P50 on something like this.
Yeah, we would agree.
So was, Michaela, how was the stress test too, if you could add in a little explanation on all these projects?
If I could answer first on this question to confirm, looking at the coverage with the 100% exemption assistance, it's just over 1 times. And so that coverage is projected to grow over the 10-year period. The returns with assistant, two metrics. One, the annual return is very low, meaning the annual return on investment is very low, especially in the early years upon stabilization based on the components that we just talked about. And the long-term 10-year IRR is on the very low range. of the spectrum of what is reasonable as well. And to address the question on the sensitivity, I think in all of these, what we, in all of the projects, what we looked at is in the balance of debt and equity. These projects are all financed, they're all financed as either 75% debt, 25% equity, or 80% debt, 20% equity. So we did look at, understanding if the adjustment to what was financed respectively in debt and equity, how that would change both the coverage and the returns. We also analyzed within each of these, what vacancy rates they were incorporating as another factor, to understand again if they're overstating or understating their revenues or expenditures and how that would compare to performance of the project. And I think, from that point, where a lot of this analysis is based on assumptions at this point. So as far as next steps, and assuming moving forward with the projects, there's typically an agreement between the city and the developer, and within the agreement there are terms related to the assistance that's provided. And so in a lot of cases, you can have additional provisions in the agreements that help protect the city that, based on, and all the taxing entities, that based on the assumptions that are used in these pro formas, to the extent that they vary significantly, that would potentially impact the level of assistance, that there could be some metrics. So that's forward and into the future, but I just want to point out that, we do try to look at the different metrics of it, the different ways that could positively or negatively impact these pro formas to really understand what is driving the need.
Any follow-on questions?
No, I appreciate that, Michaela, and you were in here when I said it earlier. One of the positions that I'm in is taking a look at what's the benefit or opportunity for the school district here to bring in revenue today, because that's what we're facing as a board. What it sounds like, not having your pro forma and being able to dig into it, it sounds like this is a very slim margin project. So respecting that, I understand why you're here asking for a TIF, but that is the position that our school board is going to be taking a look at all of these projects, is whether there's a public attribute to it for the district to take advantage of, and that is one of the benefits that we'll be considering. So if there is something that is part of this that the school district could view as a benefit to the district directly, that would weigh heavily, I think, in our consideration.
No, I think that's something we're very empathetic to and understand your situation. Is there a tangible benefit to you that is accretive day one? I don't think so. I think, the school district and all of us with, call it a bold vision and long-term thinking, is really what is going to propel our community forward. And I think all of these developments, not just ours, everyone's combined, is really what creates a sense of community and why people choose to live here. And if we do have regression in population growth, the budget problems have only started. And so I think that's why bold visions and bold leadership and population growth, revenue solves everything. And when a community is growing, it really changes the dynamics of what your taxing mechanisms look like and everything. And I think a good example is Duluth, Minnesota. And they went through massive population regression and probably closed 30 to 40% of their schools there. And, and now they're back day one. We're working on projects there. And I think they've really come to terms with the fact that development, real estate, and communities are businesses. And if they don't provide a reason for capital to be there, it's not going to be there. And so, that's why we're trying as a company to commit to downtown Grand Forks, commit to Grand Forks ourselves. And this project isn't probably great for the public schools day one, but I think the work that Northridge Construction does internally, we just developed 50 acres on the south end of Grand Forks. It's going to have roughly $100 billion worth of taxable buildings day one on it, and it's, you know, under construction and in play, so.
Thank you, Mr. Miscavige. I think just in general, having an actual calculator, having our finance department not only look at any of the TIFs that we currently have within the city, Ritterman's building and so on, and when they come off, and then look at the finances for all of these projects and what they will eventually mean to the city, whether some of them are start at 20% right away or 10% or what they'll mean in the future, I think would be very important and a good way to help convince the taxing entities of the value of these developments.
Council President Sandy, we'll plan, I think we've got pieces to put together for Monday when we come back to the committee of the whole, and we can talk about these current ones and also the future ones, or the past ones and when they come off. So we'll have some information. And then when we go visit with the other taxing entities, we'll have that in place too as part of the conversation.
Great. Mr. Mayor, comment?
Just being that close to Central High School, is there any benefit that, you know, somehow shared benefit or discounted space or anything like that that could be brought into it so the school district has maybe nothing on the tax side, but some sort of partnership that would help them going into the future?
We did talk with them briefly months back. I can't even remember the time. It's got to be pre-COVID now that I think of it. John Holt and myself and Terry Brenner and some other constituents of his had met. And I don't think at that time they were ready to commit to any space. We had talked to them about adding a second podium level embedded in our parking structure. So it would be one tier up, roughly 16 feet in the air, would be a 43,000 square foot deck that they could take. And I think it'd be a great way for them to get substantial square footage in the downtown that would be able to, I would say just give you guys the ability to grow into either a tech center, additional class spaces, and or other needs at an exceptionally reasonable price. So there is that option, and we would love for them to be a part of the project.
Mr. Phelan?
And I think that would be a way, you know, if we've focused a lot on workforce, and Ms. Mikula and I talked about this, is it can't be it has to be our school district, and how do we help the schools, because when schools are strong in Grand Forks, the whole community is strong, to what John's talking about. But even if we're going to move forward with career and technical education, or you know, career centers that the governor likes, and I think even the legislature, how do we engage the private sector and along with us to create great places for our students and partner with the school district, and so they don't feel like they're on an island and doing it on their own. So I think that this can create that conversation that's John's talking about.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks, Mr. Phelan. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Ms. Gavich, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the time.
The final one, I think Mr. Koontz is online, and this is one of our most historic buildings that he's making a run at, trying to move forward with renovating this building. And at the end, we'll talk about there's some gap funding, you know, a TIF bond. Council President Sandy about $900,000. Michaela's going to talk about maybe there's some alternative ways that we could help fund that maybe through a growth fund, so we don't sell a TIF bond. But we'll talk about the gap. But I think some of the visuals are really great of what Mike and Icon are planning to do with the St. John's Block building. So with that, I turn it over to Mike.
Mr. Koontz,
to take it from there.
Good afternoon.
Hi, everyone. How are you guys? Thanks for taking the time. And I just need about 5 minutes. I'll click through what I've put together, and then we'll pause and go from there. Able to see the screen?
Yep, we got it.
All right. Block V is the project. Of course, most people know it as St. John's Block. We're looking at early 2021 to get started and move things along there. Just to orientate those that maybe aren't familiar with it, sets up right on the corner. It's kind of the gateway entrance coming across the river onto MERS, and corner of North 3rd into MERS, and we've been having some fun going back and finding some of the old nostalgia that goes with it. Of course, that's the existing condition. A lot of that building as far as I can tell, hasn't been touched, except after, there was a little bit of flurry in there after the flood in '97 to repair some things, and then even prior to that, I'm having a hard time seeing much that's been improved. So we have bought the building and have some plans to do as much of a historic renovation as possible with the exterior, and just excited about that architecture and what that project can look like freshened up. Again, some of the old imagery built to 1890, dirt roads and overhead power lines, and just some neat stuff there, some real nostalgia. Days gone by on those upper levels as well. With that old building is going to come some challenges, and real quickly, there's a few things we want to address and we're going to have to address to make it successful. And first one is the needs of the community, and we make sure we identify the market and hit that. Not sure what that means yet on first floor or the lower level, but certainly it's a high traffic, it's pedestrian, it's right across from Town Square, which I really liked, and I think we're going to figure out what that market is and kind of play to it and see what comes forward with complete renovation of those lower levels. Structurally and architecturally, we got to look at new windows, elevators, the stairways don't meet code. There's just some really throwback times that we have to solve going through there and update the building. Hazardous abatements, things like that, a lot of it was cleaned up post flood, and there's still a little bit more to do there. Item 4, creating a financial plan that works. I looked at this building probably 3-4 years ago, took a run at it. It is a hard building to get to work financially, and it has some history as well with previous tax benefits and things like that being used on it. So really the TIF ask is kind of our best tool to try and pull this together and achieve the vision. And then finally, code approvals, architectural solutions, we're going to launch into that and get new building plans and all those upgrades figured out here early 2021. So block V, the V, we have a vision that we really want to strive for, and it's also we want to create this venue. Not sure what's going to go in there yet on the main floor, but the building from the outside has this timeless, opulent, glamorous days of years gone by, and we want to bring that back inside the lobby. And this is just some imagery that will show where we're going with those first floor improvements and maybe some of the clean, modern interior living, and that's our direction there. Exterior, the V is the vistas, of course. It's an amazing corner, looking all directions, and just to remind you guys or give you a glimpse of what that looks like from the rooftop, and again, why that asset is just such a uniquely positioned in Grand Forks to have an upgrade and be a new shiny thing downtown. Similar graphic to what you've seen, and Michaela, I'm sure will talk in depth, but we pay about $28,000 a year now in taxes. We're looking at almost $8 million total project cost investment, and it's a thin deal. I'm glad John went first because he could educate you guys on a thin deal, because I'm right with that as well, and then ultimately, after the 20-year term, I think it can be a nice, strong, stabilized asset that we can all be proud of for many years to come. Todd, back to you.
Council President Sandy, I'm going to have Michaela describe this, but, you know, back to, again, to the school district's argument, we need something up front. So we talked about a TIF revenue bond, about 900,000. It's probably on the lowest level you'd want from all the administrative costs. And I think Michaela told me she thinks a TIF bond right now is selling around 4%. So anyways, trying to, not to say that we know what the gap is at 900,000, maybe there's a way that we can internally finance this within the city at a lower interest rate and maybe get something back to the other local government entities too, if we can find alternative ways to finance, you know, where this gap is at, and we get something back on the tax roll sooner rather than later. So that's what we've been discussing the last couple of days with Michaela. But with that, I'd ask Michaela to kind of conclude on what we're initially looking at with this particular project.
Thanks, Todd. Again, to reiterate, our approach for reviewing this project was the same as the others, taking into account what all the upfront costs are and how those costs can be financed over the long term and over the life of what's being requested for assistance. In this particular project, we did have, as Todd had said, the developer has asked for $900,000 of assistance up front through a TIF bond. And in talking with them, we first asked the question if upfront assistance was necessary or if we could explore annual exemptions alternatively. And the answer from the developer was that for one, the coverage is on the very low side based on the projections, which means that there's not an ability to obtain more debt for this project. And so looking at the equity, he had indicated that based on the projected performance of this project, that they would not be able to attract additional equity investors since this project does run on the low side of the performance, and again, based on the costs that are being financed and the ultimate performance of the mixed-use building split between the residential and the commercial components. I think that as Todd had also indicated, what we are currently exploring is if there's a way to finance the project internally, which by doing so, if we're able to look at lower interest rates or more flexibility with repayments and structure it that there's a way of not having to capture or look at 100% of the revenues would be the goal on the outcome of this project.
Thank you, Ms. Hewitt. Mr. Phelan, any follow-up?
Nope.
Comments?
That's all we have. We stand for any final questions, but our intent is to go to the committee of the whole and then city council yet this month. Send out notifying letters to our local government partners, schedule additional meetings throughout January, and then have a final public hearing on February 1st on all four of these projects if the city council does move them forward on December 21st. That's the schedule we're on right now, so we're all in right now if we can get through city council, and then there'll be lots of engagement over the next month or so.
I think in general, it's very exciting to have so many developers wanting to put so much money into our community. It is, timing on this is very difficult, and I totally agree with the school district's position and understand the concern because they do have significant financial constraints. I think we should continue to work with the school district moving forward with Team Grand Forks and advocate for additional funding from the state of North Dakota. I think that should be one of our, as a city, one of our biggest priorities right now because we know the dire situation they are in, as well as school districts, as pointed out, school districts all across the state. So I know I, for one, am happy to advocate on behalf of the school district in any way I can. So any additional thoughts or comments? I guess my take on this is I would like to see all of these developments move forward. I will be advocating to the city council to approve the TIF financing. I would like to make sure, I'm not trying to say that Ms. Hewitt hasn't done a very good job. I'd like more to look at all of the financial analysis that she went through as well, to make sure that I'm comfortable with the numbers as presented. I'm sure, Mr. Carpenter, you'd probably be interested in looking at us as well. And Ms. Mikula, absolutely, I think we should do that, as well as, again, as we have discussed, provide what does this actually mean in terms of dollars for us and when for our community. I think it is easy to dwell on what we're not getting today. I think what we also should take into consideration is what the benefits are of having the new developments as well. So, Mr. Mayor, comments?
Yeah, I think I would just like to say, I don't think there's another city, at least that I know of in the country, with 58,000 people that's got $110 million worth of projects going forward in the middle of a global pandemic. And I really think this is going to build momentum. I want to see more projects outside of downtown. You look at Holiday Inn out on Gateway, you look at that whole Gateway corridor, you look at the Columbia Mall, you look at that Washington corridor. We need to start seeing some development there, and hopefully this is the momentum that'll push those developments to continue in those places, to see projects citywide. But I don't think we can lose the fact that, we're sitting in here deciding whether $110 million worth of development projects and business moving forward, and Minnesota, New York, and California are, almost in open revolt against their governments from businesses. So I think that's a pretty exciting thing for us to be able to do here in North Dakota, and I'm pretty excited to see the progress. So thank you.
Thank you. Any closing? Yes, Mr. Carpenter.
I guess just a couple things. I think today I'll probably vote in favor of moving these forward, but that does not mean I'm going to support them at the school district level as to whether we should participate or not, which will take place in January. Particularly a couple of these, I have some real concerns from a school perspective. I am concerned about when does whether it's through TIF, whether it's through 5-year property tax exemptions, whatever they are, when does it start stopping in Grand Forks? I mean, is there a point where, or is it just forever we're going to approve projects? I mean, is it at some point in time where the private sector just steps up and does a project? And I think we have to start talking about that and what that looks like. It would certainly help in these projects and what may be coming in the future, because if it's always assistance, at some point, we're not getting enough growth in the property tax base to support at least the school district. And so, I mean, some of these projects are going to be 20 years. Well, there are kids that aren't even born yet. We're going to educate them all the way through without any benefit of tax revenue from these projects. And that's a long time. Might be really good in 20 years, but we may not get 20 years. So that's just my comment.
I think just to that point, if you look at what Mr. Miscavige mentioned earlier, their development on the south end, over $100 million, and they didn't ask for any tax abatement. I think there are significant numbers. The vast majority of the new development that goes on in our town doesn't ask for a TIF. I think the ones that don't pencil out ask for a TIF. And unfortunately, most of that comes in downtown Grand Forks. Yes, Mr. Phelan, comment?
I agree with you, Council President Sandy, but we have to remember those south end developments are moving forward because we invested a lot of infrastructure that is nobody sees except for the city of Grand Forks. So the reason why they can move forward with all those is because we put in pump stations. We put all that stuff in advance. And this is, we're not taking as much as we could on the tax side, but it's a great project on the south end, but, and you know this, Mr. Sandy, we invest a lot in infrastructure to make projects happen, and that's the payoff they're getting on the south end, I think.
Thank you. Yes, Ms. Mikula.
Maybe to provide just a little bit different take on what I think Doug's question is, and at least specifically for me, and I asked Mr. Phelan this morning. And there've been references to West Fargo and how they apply TIF and how aggressively they've gone after it. One of the things that I'd like to understand better from a city standpoint is what are the guiding principles for application of these types of incentives? Specifically, how are we targeting them? What are the metrics for determining when an area has been transformed to the extent that now it's self-sustaining in terms of attracting development? And, for example, I think one of the answers to the question of when are we going to be done, well, TIFs are targeted at brownfield redevelopment, not greenfield new development. So hopefully you forever have these opportunity corridors within your city, on a rolling basis throughout a community if it's already established, and you're not sprawling out. You don't see TIFs in sprawl, you see TIFs in infield. And so I recognize there's always a place for it. The question really is, what's the metric of success? When has a certain area had enough TIF and incentive support that developers should just want to develop because that area has been revitalized? It's no longer blighted. It's attractive. There's IRRs sustaining themselves. So I would like to ask that of the city, to maybe have a conversation with the school district about what are those guiding principles for application, so that we have an understanding of what does it look like and what are we aligning our guiding principles as a school district, so we can vote looking at a framework.
That's probably the most logical thing that's been said all day. I totally agree. Yeah, Mr. Falk, Mr. Engen, any comments?
Yeah, this is Dave Engen. That's been a really excellent presentation. I wish we could just do everything all the time, but I'll wait to hear what the financial experts, have to say about it going forward. And they're all very interesting. Tom?
Yeah, thank you. They are interesting, they're exciting projects, and I sympathize with the school district. And I coming as an elected official, it's much easier to sell these projects to the taxpayer when there is at least some taxes coming back on the project, even if it's 90-10, makes it much more palatable to the taxpayer. So a couple of these projects, I'm sure are going to get some criticism, and we'll have to hopefully work through that.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, thanks. We did good today. Thanks everybody for coming. We're adjourned. Well, I assume that, sure, we can vote to move them forward. I don't know if this body has any authority to vote on anything.
If I could describe, I'll describe the step. I think I'll describe it as a general consensus to move the projects forward for a final determination. I think that's what I heard today.
Yeah, I think each of our governing bodies are going to scrutinize the projects on their own, but certainly the purpose of us being here is some advanced information, and so that we can advocate either for or against the project within our own entities. So
there's nothing saying that the project shouldn't move forward with some further scrutiny and a final vote.
Thank you.